Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way.
Last week we looked at the theory of ethics and tried to understand what that was all about. This week we want to look at some ethical codes. Now there are a number of different codes we could be looking at. We could be looking at the American Psychological Association, we'd be looking at the American Counseling Association, but instead of that we're going to be looking at the American Association of Christian Counselors Code for Counseling, and we're going to be looking at our own code for coaching. And what are we looking for? We want you to get a broad view of what are the different issues, and we'll discuss some of those issues as we go along to understand what is actually happening here and how this code is different than the other codes. Because it is different, this code was designed specifically for counseling within the church and Christian counseling. And you're going to see some differences here from the other codes, and I'll mention some of those as we go along. The first thing about this, it was written in 1998. And it's voluntary when written, but eventually for credentialing or membership in the profession or ministry roles. So this is not binding on anybody at this particular point. They felt that the biblical and ethical foundations were important. So the foundation of this code, which of course is very different from secular codes, is based on Jesus as our model of counseling, the essential relationship with the church, respect for biblical revelation on life, the priesthood, and the family, dedicated to excellence in clinical service, integrity in practice, and respect for others, spirit-led integration of spiritual, psychological, social, physical, and environmental interventions. So it's going to try and cover all of those different areas. Biblical and constitutional right of religious freedom protects the identity and the spiritual practices in counseling. And we're going to see that that's going to be the most important thing. Because to a Christian, what's the most important thing? Your relationship with God, isn't it? And we're going to see that very different in this code of ethics. Representatives of Christ and His church honoring commitments and obligations in all social and professional obligations. So we're going to go straight through that code to start with here. And the first thing of that code says this: first, do no harm. Avoid all manner of harm in client-congregational relationships and recognize the power differential. Remember we talked about power last time? And we said as soon as you don't believe there's a power differential between you and the people in your church, or you and the people you're counseling, or the people you're coaching, you are headed for a problem in the area of ethics. Resolve client conflicts in the interest of the client, referring if necessary. Protect clients from other practitioners' abuse. Work to correct any unethical entanglements with managed care. And so I'm just going to read some of these over as we go through it, then I'm going to highlight the ones that are really important. Refuse to participate, advocate, or assist clients to do harm. What does that mean? If you have a client that is going to do something and you feel it is harmful, you don't have to go along with that just because it's their choice. What could you do? Say, I'm sorry, but if you want me to help you do something that I feel is going to harm somebody else, I can't go along with that. You can set a boundary there. Notice this: refuse to advocate abortion and provide alternatives. There was a case in California where in counseling a pastor basically just said to somebody, abortion is wrong, and they were sued because they were stating their opinions and not taking the account of the client opinions into account. This is saying, according to our ethical code, you can do that. Now, why are these ethical codes so important? Because if you were brought into court, they could use this ethical code to show that you were doing something wrong against your own ethical code. That's why you have to be careful which organizations you join, because by joining those organizations, you're generally accepting their ethical code, and it can be used for you or against you. That's why I belong right now only to the American Association of Christian Counselors. I used to belong to another one of the secular groups, and because of some of their stands and because their ethical code, I don't want to be under that ethical code. So therefore, I won't belong to their organization. Because whatever you agree to can be used against you or for you in court. Refuse to participate in or advocate euthanasia or assisted suicides, but might support the wish to end the use of artificial means to support life. So clearly you were saying in this code, we don't do that. And you could use this code how? To protect yourself from a client. If someone is saying, well, I want to do this and you want to tell me how to do it and so on and so forth, you say, I'm sorry. According to my ethical code, I can't do that. Or I won't do that. Sexual misconduct is forbidden. Romantic, sexual, erotic, or seductive behaviors. Now look at this. All sexual relationships with former clients are prohibited. Other secular sexual codes sometimes say within a 2-year period, or within a certain time period. According to this code, if anyone is one of your clients, you can never, for the rest of your life, be in a sexual relationship with that person. Do not counsel formal sexual partners or marital partners. Dual or multiple relationships. Some can be ethical. This is very different from a lot of the other codes, especially APA, maybe AMFT, American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. Almost all the other codes say that dual relationships are unethical. They say here they can be ethical. Justification of dual relationships is required, proving no harm and informed consent. That if you have a problem there, you need to work it out with the person, and you have to be able to justify it to other counselors and people. You're not just totally off the wall in what you're doing here. Sexual or romantic relationships, close family members or friends, employees or supervisees should always be avoided. You try to avoid, if possible, not counseling somebody. Now we run into some problems here. What's our problem with this one? Well, let's just say I have some people that I have counseled before, and now they become in our program to train to be counselors. Do you see? We now have a dual relationship, don't we? But not really, because what? I'm functioning as a counselor in everything that I'm doing here, whether I'm instructing you, whether I'm supervising you, or whether I am counseling you. So I'm still wearing the same hat. Do you see what I'm saying? What should I not do? I should not be your best friend. But you see, we could even run into another problem. Let's just say one of my best friends comes here and wants to get trained, and I need to supervise them to get their degree in counseling. So do you see how mucky this gets within the church environment, within a smaller group of people? Other family members or friends, fraternal group, club, or associated members must be justified. Partnerships, employment, business relationships must be avoided. Customer relationships and barter must be justified. Notice in this code, you could actually barter on a dollar-by-dollar basis with somebody for some other service that they provide. Other codes normally exclude that and don't allow that. Do not counsel church members with whom you have a close personal relationship, business, or shared ministry relationship. Dual relationships with other church members must be justified. Do not terminate counseling in order to engage in a dual relationship. We don't play games. You know, if I'm counseling you and we want to put this business together, I don't quit counseling you just so we won't have a dual relationship, and I'll just switch from this relationship to that relationship over there. Second, competence in Christian counseling. honesty concerning competence and realistic claims or work beyond competency. You need to let the person know if this is an area you don't have a lot of experience in, and you need to refer them sometimes if you just totally no idea what to do. Refer or consult when outside of competency, feel stuck, or you're making no progress. But that's what supervision's for, isn't it? You can get in and you can get the help from the other experienced people that might have some experience there, so you can operate in that particular area. An interesting example of this is Dr. Ellender, who wrote The Wounded Heart. When he was trained as a psychologist, there was nothing on abuse in the training whatsoever. And he started having all of these ladies come to him that had been sexually abused. And this is what he said to them. I'm sorry, but I've got no training whatsoever in this area. But if you want to work with me and teach me, I'm willing to learn. And that's where the book, The Wounded Heart, came from. All of his people that worked with him and gave him information. He learned and developed the methods to deal with that. But do you see the informed consent? I'm being totally honest with you where I am. And that's very important. Maintain continuing education, maintain integrity in work, reports, and relationships, seek help for personal problems, refrain from activities that will harm clients until resolved. Let's just say you're struggling with something. Should you be counseling somebody in that particular area? Now, you probably better refer that person, or you better tell them, hey, I'm struggling in the same area, so I'm not sure you want me right now as a counselor, or whenever I get this resolved, then I'll be okay. But you need to be honest and open about those kind of things too. Informed consent. Securing informed consent for counseling, videotaping, supervision, and consulting or special procedures. If you ever read our informed consent form, we cover everything that we possibly can on that form. The one thing we don't cover on there is videotaping, so you have to make sure that you get consent for videotaping. Written consent structure and process of counseling services and for counseling minors. You always need an informed consent if you're going to see a minor by themselves. Very important. Consent for spiritual interventions. I just had a situation this week. I'm going to be counseling this girl who I determined is really struggling with a problem with inferiority. And I picked up from the parents that they're either not saved or they're barely saved, and they really don't have much of a relationship with God. And so I had to say, I want to talk to you about something here. The methods I want to use to help your daughter is showing how the world is wrong and God's method is right to deal with her self-worth and inferiority problems, and I want to use Bible models. Are you okay with that? Is that the direction you want? Or do you want me to use secular methods and so on to try to help her to the degree I can? And they said, yes, that's okay. But you see, I'm going to make sure I have informed consent, that I don't have their daughter in here and I'm teaching their daughter all sorts of stuff that they don't want their daughter to learn. Special consent for controversial interventions, such as deprogramming, hypnosis, adversive therapies, recovery of memories, counseling abortion or abuse, giving procedures, risks, and alternatives. There are a number of different things, especially in dealing with homosexuality, that there are a lot of the other codes say we don't believe that this is an acceptable thing to do, to counsel people that are homosexual to come out of homosexuality. It's one of the reasons that I dropped out of one of those groups, is because they're taking a stance like that. And of course, if they ever take those stances and put it in the ethical code, what does that mean? If you're counseling somebody, then somebody could sue you for malpractice if you tried to do that. So that's why I want to be under this code, not under one of the other codes where it could be used against me. Confidentiality, privacy, and privileged communication. Hold confidential to the fullest extent of the law, ethics, and church rules, except with written consent. Remember, unless you're licensed in this state, or you're a pastor, you don't have privileged communication. You have to be confidential, but if they pull you into court, you're going to have to deal with those issues, and we'll see that in a little bit. Assert confidentiality first to subpoenas and requests. What does that mean? You can get something in the mail from a lawyer saying, I want this person's records. So the first thing you're going to say is, I have a confidential relationship with this person, even if I don't have privileged communication. What does that mean? They're going to have to get a court order, or they're going to have to prove that I don't have privileged communication. And only comply to the limit required by the law, or a release, or give time for the client to consult a lawyer. Before you turn anything over, you're going to resist turning any information over until you can tell your client that they're asking for it, until you can do whatever is necessary to try to keep it as confidential as possible. Disclose as necessary to prevent or report suicide, homicide, or child or elder abuse, and to warn victims according to Tarasoff rules if applied in that state. Tarasoff has been applied in Kansas. Remember we talked about Tarasoff? A lady who was killed by the boyfriend in Los Angeles, UCLA, and they got the counselors on not warning the victim, not doing what they could to prevent the homicide, and so on. You have to release information for that. You're responsible. Disclose to insurance according to agreements with the client. This is real sticky. But most insurance companies have an agreement with all the people in the insurance company that they can get information from doctors and counselors. And sometimes they even go so far as to request your records. And that's a very sticky area legally. And so normally what I'll do in that case is I'll call the insurance company and say, do you have anything from these people saying that we can release those records? Or ask the person, will you release your records to the insurance company? Disclosure in supervision, training, or publication by disguising client identifiers or get written permission. Obviously, getting written permission is better, but you notice in classes and so on, we're always discussing other clients and other client situations. But how much information do I give you? Very little. And we do have something in our informed consent that allows you to discuss even the person's names and so on in supervision. So we cover this with the informed consent, and then we're trying to be careful that we don't discuss names or other things to the point that it can be identified. Preserve, store in a locked storage, and transfer to maintain confidentiality of client records. You need to keep them all locked up. Don't just toss them in your car, and so on, and take them all home, and so on and so forth. That's why we have locks on all of our file cabinets and so on, that we keep those things all locked up. Take appropriate action like password protection to protect confidentiality on computers. I have a password protection on my computer records. Fees and financial relationships. Set fees fairly and clearly, attempting to take the client's ability to pay into account. Now here's a real sticky wicket, okay? Sliding scale or pro bono is encouraged, but must extend any special agreements to third-party payers. So if you're taking health insurance payments like I do, then guess what? They're saying if I would put everybody on a sliding scale, I have to put the insurance company on a sliding scale. So instead of that, what do I have to do? I have a set fee that I charge the insurance companies for everything, and I charge that set fee to everyone. Unless, in some cases, I have an exception, but very specific, clear cases do I apply that exception. And it has to be one that doesn't apply to insurance companies, right? Sliding scale is what? Based on how much they make. Our sliding scale here is that we usually say number of dollars per hour that they make in thousands per year. They make $50,000 a year, it's $50 an hour. Make $20,000 a year, it's $20 an hour, and so on and so forth. And then we usually have a floor on that, but the minimum I'll accept is, say, $30 an hour or $45 an hour or something like that. But you're taking insurance, it changes the whole ball game there. It's considered unethical. You have to treat insurance companies just like you treat anybody else. Case notes and proper record keeping shall follow legal and appropriate practices and will be maintained by the organization and follow the client rather than the therapist. What does that mean? If you're working here and you go someplace else, you don't take the records with you, okay? a client moves to a different therapist, they can request our records and we'll send our records to them. Appropriate testing will be used within the limits of competency and validity. Remain fair and unbiased in group and family counseling, and will protect clients in these settings from abuse. They will also explain the limits of confidentiality in these groups. What are they saying? Especially in marriage counseling, be very careful that you see both people's point of view and you don't take one person's point of view. One of the most average things that happens is you get this client come in, you're only counseling one of them, and so you only have half the story, and you believe them totally, that's the entire picture. So now you're biased for your client. Now the other person comes in. How does the other person feel? You're biased toward this person, so therefore you can't really help them. So you have to be very careful that you don't do that. Working with other faiths, religions, or values to the extent possible with respect for their values, and refer if the differences are adversely affecting the counseling and they cannot be resolved. That can happen. I just a couple of months ago had somebody call and they said that they wanted to come to us and could we handle it because they belong to this particular denomination, which happens to be one of those that's sort of right on the line of whether it's Christian or occult. And they were with another Christian counselor and they couldn't work with them. But you have to work it out, and again, you have to be very careful what you believe. And again, you're not trying to push your beliefs on them, but you are going to help them to the extent that you can. Provide emergency services and continuing care during vacations or counselor transfers. What we do here, every time I go on a vacation, I appoint somebody to be over the counseling center. Usually it's a Rose, but somebody else. And if I'm gone, they can call them and get emergency help if they need that emergency help. Of course, the way we work here is you can simply just let Loretta know that you're out of town or wherever you are, and then she can get somebody else to help this person. Do not abandon or abruptly cut off services, but discuss and refer if appropriate. Abandonment is considered malpractice. You don't just say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to see you anymore, too bad. You got to at least refer to somebody else or work out something so they're not just dropped. Professional relationships. Maintain collaborative relationships and respect different approaches. Do not solicit others' clients, and if the client is receiving other counseling, advise and inform. Do not libel or slander. What they're talking about is sometimes you get somebody that comes to you and you're helping them in this area and you find out they're also going to a psychologist or even another counselor. They might be doing individual counseling with this counselor and they're coming to you for marriage counseling. What do you need to do? Need to say you need to talk to your other counselor and make sure they don't have any problem with this. There are some counseling organizations that say you can't do that. You can't have two counselors counseling the same person because they're going to get confused. The way we look at it is we can if we define the limits of what the counseling is. As an example, if I'm counseling somebody in marriage and they really need some work on their past, I might refer them to somebody else for theophostic ministry and to work on that. But they're only doing theophostic ministry over there and I'm only doing marriage counseling over here. So with good boundaries, again, that can be handled. Honor contracts. Have a clear role boundaries in the workplace. Do not discriminate in hiring. Do not take clients with you if you move. If you leave here, your clients all stay. They'll just be transferred to a different counselor. Unless we make agreements to that. Many times we don't do that. Many times we'll have them ask the client. And if the client really wants to go with them, we don't hold on to people here because we believe God can help them through a lot of different things, and we do allow sometimes clients to follow the person if they move to another place. But that is something that needs to be negotiated. Advertising public relationships. Accuracy and humility to give the clients informed choices, not using testimonies of current clients or degrading other counselors. This can be a problem. And you have to be clear. One of the issues that's come up here in this state is people that have degrees, say, in Christian counseling like I do. I have a PhD in Christian counseling. Well, on my card, it says PhD. It also says licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. At the clinical level of marriage and family therapist, I'm at a master's level, so they can be concerned thinking that I have a PhD in marriage and family counseling when I have a PhD in Christian counseling, a master's degree in psychology. So I actually have 3 degrees in 3 different areas, so which one are we talking about? Got to sort of sort that out, and you want to make that as clear as you possibly can, so you're not just confusing people. And it doesn't seem like you're claiming something you're not really at. Not misrepresent AACC membership or counseling credentials, not implying state licensure or regional accreditation that does not exist. This is a big problem in Christianity, because counselors will say, I am a licensed counselor. Well, they don't mean licensed by the state, they mean licensed by some other licensing organization. And most people take that to mean by the state. Or they might be saying, this is an accredited program. Well, yes, we're accredited through Logos, it's accredited as a Bible school, but most people think of accredited as regional accreditation. So we need to be very careful of what we're doing there and sort it out and be honest about that, is what it comes down to. Correctly represent your work in the media. Relationship with state, social system, and society. Maintain good relationships with other professionals. Work for the betterment of the church, government, or society. Accept different views and Christian participation in society. Supervision. A lot of different kinds of supervision. Obviously, we ought to do the best job that we can do. Do not exploit students, especially sexual, romantic. Avoid dual relationships. Do not counsel beyond what is needed for supervision and training. Because you don't use supervision and training to provide counseling. You use that for its purpose it's supposed to be used for. Accept only qualified candidates with informed consent. Provide a variety of experiences. Supervisors provide feedback. Education. Accept qualified students with informed consent with diverse backgrounds. Provide evaluations and assistance to correct deficiencies. Include both academic classes and practice, including diverse theories, including legal, ethical, and business aspects. You notice we give you a lot of additional stuff here to make the whole program work. Clear guidelines for practicums and internships. And research. Respect science and research standards. Protect participants' rights. Use informed consent. Report research honestly, fully, and don't distort your data. Writing. Give credit and honor for anything that somebody else has done. Resist using ghost writers and putting your name on it. Now, here are exceptions for ordained pastors and pastoral counselors. We need to really look at that, because that doesn't exist in other codes and other places. What do they define here? Pastors that counsel. How many people in the churches that do the counseling are also pastors? A large number of them. And what's that going to cause? A dual relationship automatically, isn't it? If these are people in your congregation and you're a pastor, that's one role, and you're also their counselor, that's another role. It also becomes more mucky, because how about counseling requirements versus the pastor's requirements? So let's look at those. These are exemptions. They must be justified due to higher duty to the church or the position. See, let's just take a mucky one here. If you're the pastor of this church, you have a duty for church discipline. And if you're counseling this person, and in your counseling, this person confesses to you something that requires church discipline, and you're required to have confidentiality, what are you going to do? You have 2 separate things telling you what to do. Which one are you going to choose? Do you see the problem? What we do is, in our informed consent, is we have a line in there that says that we can discuss anything with the pastors, even for church discipline. So we try to cover that. So therefore, we don't run into this trap. See, how do you feel, as an example? in one church. The person sentenced the person because this particular lady had a sexual addiction and was sleeping with most of the men in the church. Now, what if you're a counselor and this person tells you that? Well, if you don't have an exception to that, you can't tell the pastor and you can't warn the church of what's going on. Do you see how in this church thing it becomes very mucky when we need these exemptions? Should hold counselors to fidelity to the gospel. Starting to go outside of the gospel, you don't belong in this church. Lay helpers in other ministries. Primarily, we're talking one-on-one lay counseling and support groups. The exemption. The honor code, except due to a higher authority to the church or the position, just like with a pastor. Under supervision to the church or Christian counselor, do not accept fees, communication false roles, or refer if you're not qualified. So if you're a lay counselor, if you have a certification, whatever, you say, I'm certified, I don't have a degree. You need to tell them that. They need to know. What we basically tell people in our lay counseling program is, here's somebody that will listen to you, and about all they can do is hold your hand. Don't expect anything more. But of course, you're going to give them more as you grow and as you learn, and that kind of thing. Standards for resolution of ethical and legal conflicts. The higher obligation to Christ or the good of the client worked out in a way that honors Christ, first attempting to harmonize interests. Listen to this. If standing between a law or ethical principle, it must be defensible from the Bible and ethics with consultation with others in the client's best interest and be willing to accept the consequence. So what are we talking about? How about protests that break the law on abortion? How do you handle those? Well, basically what it's saying here is the priority of values is first to Christ, second to the client, and the third to the standards. Do you think you see that in any other ethical codes? We have exemptions based on what you believe is the truth, and your relationship with God has to come first, even before the client. Second is the client, and third are the ethical standards. You have to define the rule that cannot be accepted and accept all others. Just because you're saying, I can't obey the law in this particular area, or the standard in this particular area, you define that. That doesn't mean it gets you out of all the rest of the standards that are in this. Conflict with employees or colleagues in a way that honors Christ. Use direct negotiations, mediation, arbitration before litigation. In other words, you don't sue unless you've tried everything else. Confront legal or ethical violations by colleagues, confidentiality, and through appropriate channels. If you find out what somebody else has done and is inappropriate, you don't go directly to the Behavior Sciences Board or directly to their pastor. You first go to them and try to resolve it, and you take it through whatever channels that there are there. Professional organizations. Honor professional obligations and ethics unless they are in direct opposition to God. And there are some codes of ethics and other organizations that what they have might be in direct opposition to God. And this ethical code says you stand against them. And finally, conflicts the state and its laws. You may violate the law that is in direct opposition to God. But remember what it said here. You've got to justify that. And you need to talk to other people about that. Don't be some low ranger and just say, I don't like that, therefore I'm not going to do that. And also said what? Be ready to accept the consequences. If you decide to go and protest abortion and you sit there and they arrest you, you accept the consequences that it was your choice because you believed it was right. Now, how is that all different from the ethical codes of coaching? Well, let's take a look at that, and let's look at our coaching ethics. The reason we developed our own is because there is no other Christian coaching ethics out there right now. And so we developed our own code. This is what we think is appropriate, and if you're going to coach for us, we ask you to accept these particular guidelines. The first, I will exemplify Jesus Christ in all of my life, in my conduct, as a coach, seeking only the best interest of my clients and to further the kingdom of God. Number 2, I will maintain strict confidentiality within my coaching relationship except as required by law or for coaching supervision unless released by the client. So you see, that one's a lot the same. Number 3, I will clearly explain that coaching assists emotionally healthy individuals to more fully achieve their calling or ministry, where counseling primarily assists people in overcoming besetting sins, dysfunctional behavior, and relationship problems. I will be careful not to allow my coaching to be used as a substitute for counseling, legal advice, mental health, or physical health treatment. If I am not qualified, I will refer issues to a lawyer, a mental health professional, pastor, or doctor when appropriate. In other words, I'm only going to do coaching with this person unless I have these other qualifications. I will do my best to help my client achieve success in his or her life from a biblical perspective. However, I will never attempt to override my clients' rights to make their own choices or learn from their own consequences or direct their own lives unless they become a danger to themselves or others. I will give literary credit for any materials that I adapt or reference for my use. I will avoid dual relationships with my clients that might result in a conflict of interest or might interfere with the coaching relationship. Notice it doesn't say you avoid dual relationships. It says you only avoid those dual relationships that result in a conflict of interest or interfere with the coaching relationship. If such a conflict of interest exists, I will openly discuss it with my client and offer to refer him or her to another coach if desired. Number 7, I will recognize pastoral leadership within the church environment and always conduct my coaching in submission to that leadership. You can find that in the secular code? Absolutely not. I will develop, agree upon in writing, and honor the provisions of a clear coaching agreement with my clients. If I charge fees, these fees will be clearly explained in that agreement. I will accurately identify my training and experience as a coach. I will not knowingly exploit my coaching relationship for personal, professional, or social purposes. And finally, I will live my life in obedience to Jesus Christ, admit my mistakes, repent if I am wrong, be open and honest concerning my own present and past struggles, and live the Christian example to those that I coach. So to see the differences? But all that we want to do has to do with Jesus Christ first, the client, and then our ethical codes, and then we come last. So what have we done in this course? We've tried to teach you the basics of all the skills that you need in order to counsel and to coach. And we start out with the very basic things, just like attending, learning to ask questions, learning to confront. Then we talked about analysis methods. Then we talked about integrating this stuff all together. Then we've now talked about ethics and ethical codes. So you have the different things you need to really get started in counseling that go beyond just understanding the theory of counseling. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you provided all of these things and everything comes from you. And we thank you, Lord God, that you will give us the skill and you would lead us by the Holy Spirit in using these skills and integrating them and making them effective, that we can help other people, either through our counseling or through our coaching. And Lord, we give you all the glory and the honor, and we're trusting and relying on you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other.